today. So what we're going to show you today is just a little bit of our journey and to talk a bit about our experience at EMCOR UK, because certainly we believe as an organisation that there isn't any intellectual property around wellbeing. We're happy to share this. We're happy to share both the successes and the pitfalls in terms of our experience, and we're by no means finished yet. So if we could go to the next slide, Hayley, please. Nick's given a bit of an indication with regards to the background of EMCOR, rightly saying that we are based here in the UK and we operate across a very varied portfolio. But I think it's fair to say that some of that critical infrastructure stuff that we do is in some fairly high profile establishments at the moment. So DSTL, Public Health England and Department of Health, to name but three. And then in addition, we also operate in major utility groups, including Anglian Water, United Utilities and Thames. So we've got quite a broad brush portfolio. And I think the important thing here is to recognise that over the last 10, 11 months, we've had all areas of activity within our umbrella. So I think the first one is, we've had people who have been furloughed as a result of customers restricting their operations. We've also had people who've continued to operate in the front line and obviously been supporting our colleagues in that respect across some of those high profile portfolios that I've mentioned. And then we've had people like me who really haven't left the house since March of last year, in all honesty. And I'm sure those of you who have a similar experience of feeling a little bit like lighthouse keepers. That's certainly how I consider myself to be at the moment, sort of just looking out to sea and waiting for the boat to come before something else changes. And so we've had all of these kind of significant effects in terms of the way that we've worked over the last few months, and certainly some of that has informed our thinking going forward. So you can see on this slide here, we've got a number of standards, international standards that we use to frame our thinking as an organisation and test our activity. I'll just draw your attention to a couple that I think are really relevant to this conversation. So the first one, around 45,001, we've had that now since its initial change a couple of years ago. We're one of the first 5 companies in the world, in fact, to adopt that standard from the previous standard. And we're kind of taking a similar proactive approach in terms of the upcoming 45,003, the psychosocial workplace health framework, which is due later this year. And towards the end of last year, we adopted 27500, which is the human-centered approach. And there's a reason I'm talking about this. This isn't me kind of grandstanding here, but one thing that some of you may wish to think about is how those standards actually integrate with one another and how they actually draw attention of the organisation and focus attention on individuals, both in terms of performance, but also more importantly, I would suggest, in terms of their well-being in the most holistic term. So if we can go to the next slide, Hayley, please. In terms of why we do it then, well, our start point was a few years ago, and actually we were reacting to the human resources statistics around absence and staff churn and recruitment challenges. And that's really where the conversation began. And of course, we went after the initial sort of low-hanging fruit, quite literally having discussions about whether we could provide people with apples and bananas and whether that should be our wellbeing policy. And then, of course, into that kind of foundation discussion around integrating an EAP, an employee assistance program within our organisation, which we duly did. But we were really keen for that not to be the catch-all and for that not to be our solution to improving well-being and enabling colleagues to flourish at work. So we had a look at what well-being meant to us as a business and how we wanted to define it. And you can see a couple of sort of indicative definitions there on the screen. And let's face it, 12 months ago, we didn't really understand whether or not well-being had a hyphen in it or not. And it's really moved apace. And we wanted to ensure that our approach to well-being has an authenticity and really means something. So we've baked it into the purpose of our business. So our business statement is a better world at work. And well-being for us as an organisation sits very much at the heart of that. And that is something that's come to bear in the last sort of 6 or 7 months or so. In addition to that, we've adopted the global goals, formerly the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations, and Nick mentioned sustainability, and I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of this presentation. But we've adopted those 5, and for those of you who've got an understanding of these, you'll be aware that the third tile, number 3 out of 17 tiles, is actually headed up as well-being and is an omission here. So if I go back to our point about authenticity, when we explored that tile in detail, we felt as a business that we couldn't actually affect any of the target areas that the United Nations were looking for organisations to affect, because it's very practitioner-led, and we're a facilities management organisation. We're not practitioners. So where we draw down in terms of our better world at work and our approach to well-being is in number 8 there. So that decent work, that really is where then the person-centred approach, the human-centred approach comes in. And so we have a kind of a merger there of both our ISO standards, the way we do things as an organisation, and also what we stand for in terms of our business integrity and purpose. So if we just go to the next slide, Hayley, please. So where is the responsibility in the organisation? Well, both Hayley and I have it within our job titles, as pointed out to you, but realistically, wellbeing should and is owned by the whole organisation. So what we've got here is a graphic which shows you where we see the kind of interfaces between other parts of our business. The HR ones are kind of obvious, and a lot of businesses do have their wellbeing activity within their HR function. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. We've done it slightly differently. So we are shoulder to shoulder with our HR colleagues, but we're also shoulder to shoulder with a number of other departments, in fact, all other departments that operate within our business. And then within the team that I work alongside, you can see there the specific roles that they undertake. And I think the most interesting one that is perhaps a little bit different is that we've looked to bring safety under the umbrella heading of well-being. And if you just kind of ponder that for a moment, the reason that we've done it is because for years as an organisation, we shouted safety from a physical point of view. So everything was baked into the Health and Safety at Work Act. It was predicated on risk assessing physical tasks in the workplace, and that was really within our DNA. And then a few years ago, we decided that we should start making those step changes to affecting psychological health as well, and treating it with the same rigor and enthusiasm and kind of relentless approach that we apply to the physical safety aspect. And so last summer, we made quite a bold step, I think, as an organisation, to remove safety from a board job title and to put it into the wellbeing canon, if you like. And then my role is to go out and tell people why we've done it and to kind of substantiate that decision making. But once again, if we go back in our minds to the points that I was making around parity between psychological and physical safety, we didn't really have a choice, because otherwise we were then not going to be true to our purpose. And I think, this is something that that is explored in a number of conversations that I have like this, and certainly piqued people's interest. Be it right or be it wrong, it's what we've done. And if nothing else, it opens up a conversation around it. So I guess in short then, we've given you a bit of background as to where we started. I've tried to show you there a little bit about whose responsibility it is and how it's discharged within the organisation, and also to give you a bit of a framework that we are operating within in terms of those ISO standards. But a lot of what we've done to date, including, by the way, thinking about giving people apples and bananas as a wellbeing intervention, has been based around reaction. So using those HR statistics to drive out activity. And the space that we're looking to move into now, and that Hayley's going to talk about with you in a moment, is to really being proactive and to start to introduce some kind of measurement, you know, the so what bit that says, well, we're doing all of these things, and what difference is it making other than giving us all a bit of a warm glow that we're doing something. Before I hand over to Hayley, there's one last part I think that is really important from this slide's perspective, and that's that supply chain piece. So we operate probably 50% of our activity through supply chain partners, which is why collaboration was one of those ISO standards, and collaboration was one of the 5 tiles from the global goals activity. We see this very much as a collaborative approach to well-being. So as I opened with, there's no intellectual property with this. We genuinely believe it and feel it and work with it all day, every day. But we're trying not to just wrap our arms around it and say, well, this is what we do as an organisation. We are very open and quite insistent with supply chain partners that we're all sharing knowledge and our journeys together. And in the same way, we're looking to extend that dialogue into customer spaces as well. And a number of the customers that we work with, and some of those that I listed, are doing fantastic work. And we're learning as much from them as they are from us. But hopefully that's been interesting with respect to how we've got to where we've got to. So Hayley, I'm going to hand over to you now just to give a bit of background in terms of what we're up to right this minute.
Thank you, Jonathan. So our intention is to move from a transactional to a transformational approach, as Jonathan has mentioned. So from protection to promotion and really towards impact measure. So this diagram that you can see on the screen at the moment is demonstrating how we are doing it and really how we're pulling everything Jonathan has kind of spoken about into a kind of strategic plan. So central to wellbeing is EMCOR's DNA, our purpose to create a better world at work, and then our values. As Jonathan mentioned, wellbeing is a stream of our people critical success factor, which demonstrates an amplification of our HR metrics, with the overall purpose of achieving our global goal, number 8, decent work. This is just one indication of our joint up method in achieving our wellbeing strategy. Adopting the collaborative approach recognizes the link between diversity and inclusion, the global goals, and also operational delivery. We cannot isolate well-being. It's codependent on a number of organizational enablers. We have leadership accountability, data-driven decision-making, and infrastructure. So everything we do is integrated and permeating collectively to achieve this better world at work. Central in achieving our ambitious goals, as Jonathan mentioned, are the 7 principles of ISO 27500. We've adopted these principles to expand our organizational value, which is people who care. As Jonathan also said, towards the end of this year, we'll be looking to adopt the 45003 framework. So EMCOR UK have quite a distributed workforce. And we have a number of different client contractual obligations, which has required us to adopt a 2-prong approach. Firstly, a proactive overall organizational wellbeing strategy, implementation, and wellbeing maturity model. These use existing metrics and hygiene factors to identify areas for improvement through that proactive approach of promotion, awareness, education, self-management, and line manager support. What we recognize, though, is secondly, we need an operational model. So we've got the operational wellbeing maturity model, which we developed as a condensed version, which has fewer wellbeing performance indicators. What this does is helps to provide a guide to support the operational directors, account managers, and their teams to conduct self-assessments of their wellbeing maturity, and then they are provided with a gap analysis. What this does is creates local empowerment, enabling employees at an operational level to build their own wellbeing bases within the organization. It's imperative to this collective working approach that the WSA team, as Jonathan spoke about, work collaboratively with our operational teams to be able to provide the subject matter expertise to provide local wellbeing. So the operational maturity model leads to organizational maturity. Through ongoing gap analysis and data trending, these models collectively work together towards impact disclosure and help us support the measurement of our wellbeing maturity. Okay, so the next slide demonstrates what we like to talk about as the inter-directional nature of the wellbeing strategy. So whilst the maturity model provides us with a linear way of progressing wellbeing maturity within the organization, this diagram clearly shows us that wellbeing strategy is not a linear one. There's a number of different activities going on at any one time, but this really demonstrates the collective approach towards shifting the needle on mental health and wellbeing. Consequently, the pace of change and the success of the strategy is dependent on authenticity, leadership accountability, and an understanding for each employee as to where they fit in all of this. So what does it really mean to our leaders? What does wellbeing really mean to our people? And how can we kind of get that out there into our workforce? So what we've done is we've tried to take this kind of interdirectional nature of travel and develop something that clearly explains how we adopt a collective approach to make sure that this wellbeing movement is a successful one across the organization. Sorry, just having some technical difficulties with getting the next. There we go. So we developed this inverse triangle, which is a diagrammatic demonstration of this collective approach to creating a wellbeing movement across our organization. It is underpinned by a wellbeing culture of inclusivity. Everyone is given a purpose, permission, and the understanding of what part they are required to play. The tone from the top is imperative in making sustainable change and promoting a better world at work. Our senior leaders are accountable for the well-being of our people and promoting an authentic change in culture. At the moment and moving forward, followers are looking for trust, stability, a sense of hope, compassion, and genuine sense of care. In the same way we take responsibility for business results, leaders must take responsibility for the well-being of their people. So to execute physical, psychological, sociological, and financial well-being, we need to create an environment whereby all employees find meaning and purpose, and they feel they can bring their whole selves to work. Several human-centered tactile programs form part of EMCOR's strategic delivery in order to achieve decent work. However, the fundamentals lie within culture, identity, and ethical behavior in order to promote this genuine approach to well-being. We have policy and best practice charters which demonstrate our commitment to a culture where mental health, well-being, and decent work are at the heart of everything that we do. Whilst policy and best practice is a starting point, evident and behavioural change is what is really required. As discussed, gap analysis enables us to identify where improvement and promotion is required. Our wellbeing performance indicators, along with hygiene factors of our people, along with the hygiene factors and identifying the true needs of our people, and also identifying root cause through the use and measurement of data, is really important to be able to make change. We're not only focusing on ensuring data is correctly captured, one needs to also ask the right questions and elicit feedback through the promotion of an open, honest, and psychologically safe environment. If we're talking about reducing stigma, pro-social work practices go some way in promoting a safe and secure workplace, as they enable employees to develop a positive working identity, and they are key elements in our wellbeing strategy. So we've got wellbeing champion networks, mental health aware colleagues, and other support forums, which enable employees to actively partake in our wellbeing programs. It also promotes early intervention and the removal of stigma. Stigma is removed when we begin to model our values. When led from the top, we collectively are committed to promoting a better world at work through the language that we use and the way in which we communicate and act. Our movement is one in which we approach our promise together as equals, and where nobody has the right to step outside of this wellbeing promise. Whilst there's so much that we can share with you, we had a limited amount of time, so I hope that kind of just captures the way in which we've gone about trying to drive this authentic change and use the wellbeing maturity model to identify how we can measure success and what success looks like in terms of actually trying to find a measurement of where we are in terms of maturity. So I'm now going to pass over to Jonathan, who will discuss whether wellbeing in the workplace is actually worth it.
Thanks, Hayley. So I'm aware we were given 20 minutes and I think we're bang on. So is it worth it? Yes. I'll do it very, very quickly. Morally, yes. Legally, yes, although that's a bit tenuous. There is a bit in there in the Health and Safety at Work Act, but nothing really explicit. I think the question is, how do we convince people that it's worth it? Well, social value is coming into the tender space. And on that basis, we know from a work-winning perspective, for those of you in that environment, that it's going to be critical if it isn't already. Obviously, it makes companies attractive from a recruitment and retention perspective. It adds to the sustainable agenda. And I know, Heather, you've raised a query on the chat, which I'm happy to expand upon. And Nick, you raised the sustainability question as well. But let me just put this out there. So if we think about sustainability with a big S and everything that was on TV last night with David Attenborough, and then we think about it with a small s in terms of longevity and organizational resilience, then sustainability in its most holistic term is absolutely fundamental to the success of an organization. So there's another conversation that can be had for people who don't necessarily think well-being has got an organizational place. So it should form part of horizon planning, I guess. And the last bit for me then is the sell at the board table. I talked about who has responsibility for discharging it within the organization. I'm fairly not precious about where it sits around the board table, but it needs to sit around the board table. It needs to sit at that level to have some influence. And I think the last part, if anybody needs some form of the is it worth it bit, I need a sort of kick up the backside to get on with it. Well, sustainability disclosures are coming. And that's a given. We're already seeing them within the financial markets. If we think about that, what does sustainability mean? Big S, small s, both S's. It's on its way. And so there will be some reporting required at a point in time. So if you need no more cajoling than that, there's a goodie. And that's it for us. Thank you very much indeed for listening. I hope you found that helpful, and certainly Hayley and I are around now for questions should anybody have any.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, both Jonathan and Hayley. Lots to think about there, and we have come into the question and answer session. So if anyone would like to put their message in the chat, what we'll do is we'll take them in the order of the chat. But if you want to come on and unmute to say your question once we identify you, please do. You don't have to. You can just ask it in the chat and we'll relay it. But just in the meanwhile, I wanted to sum up and say thank you for that. I think there's a lot of things there that are really pertinent to today's discussion about assessing workplace wellbeing. In particular, if the approach that works and is really useful is integrated, how do we make sure we're aware what combinations of practices in workplace wellbeing do? And that's something that we at Norwich Business School are currently looking at with our research project at the moment. There was also Jonathan, you said about moving from being reactive to being positive and proactive. And I think that's something that a lot of people are trying to make the move to do at the moment. So that's something we can reflect on as well in our discussions today. And the last thing was, I was very struck by Hayley talking about tools for local empowerment. So the idea that you might be able to, rather than using assessment as some kind of external thing, people themselves can use assessments themselves to empower them to contribute to this agenda. So those are the things that stuck out for me, but I'd love to hear what stuck out for other people. Please do pop some questions in the chat and we'll take them one by one. Thank you.